Taos this week. No rest for the Ravens in free agency, preparing for the draft, as well as the Orioles and the WBC. But all eyes on the Terrapins on Thursday, and of course March Madness, the brackets. This guy is into the brackets beginning, right around Thanksgiving or so. He covers all things college football as well as basketball at Fox Sports, and you can follow his journey there or out on Twitter at Aaron_Torres. We welcome our defending champion back on. Aaron, I got to ask you, you're a little younger than me. I'm 48 these days, so my brackets go back to 1979, 1980, the Magic, Larry Bird, sort of that era of my middle school. I have never, ever, and I bragged about this for 25 years now on the radio, I've never won a bracket pool anywhere. 1 year I came close. 1 year I was alive until the Final Four, but I have never, as they say, cashed a check, wink, wink, on a bracket pool. Every year it looks like it's easy. You just take the chalks, and it just never works out that way, right?
So, Nestor, I have a story for you. You're going to hate me for sharing this.
You cashed. I know. I can tell.
No, it's worse than that. 2001, I had Maryland beating Arizona in the championship game. I couldn't stomach the possibility of Duke winning the national championship.
Well, we couldn't stomach losing a 30-point lead either, but we did.
Yeah. So I literally, going into the Final Four weekend, this was a massive pool. I mean, I'm talking hundreds of people. The only scenario in which I lost the pool, I might have had Arizona over Maryland, I can't remember, but the only scenario that I could lose the pool was Duke beating Arizona in the championship game. I lost hundreds of dollars, which I was a teenager at the time, and that hundreds of dollars would have bought me I would have pimped out my 1991 Nissan Sentra so hard. I would have gotten so many girls. But not only did I lose the pool, but Duke lost, and at that point, Duke was about as insufferable as they've ever been.
By the way, it was a 22-point deficit. It wasn't 30. It was only 22 points at the Metrodome. That was a sick evening. I mean, I was at Padonia Station that night. We had a huge crowd. Maryland had never been to the Final Four. Obviously, not just getting there, but getting there and seeing Duke on the other side, and then to have the big lead. That was, there've been some really bad Maryland losses. There've been some nights where, darkness fell upon the land. That was the darkest of dark hours. And, of course, a year later they won the national championship and sort of avenged it, much like when the Ravens, Billy Cundiff and Lee Evans, the field goal and the drop ball. The next year you come back and win. So there is something to that. But it is funny that 15 years later, 16 years later, you didn't cash your check. I'm sorry about that, man. What about a lot of cheeseburgers for you?
I was going to say, it's just ironic that it has the Maryland subplot. I mean, listen, let's be honest. If it was 1997 and I picked, UCLA over UNLV or something, I don't know that Nestor Aparicio really cares. But that one, I think, probably hit a little home to you and certainly probably to your audience.
Well, this is what made me care about this bracket, just so you know. You've been getting these brackets all your life. I've been getting the brackets all my life. I've stopped trying to win money, right? Like, I'm not entering the ESPN $1 billion challenge. I'm not winning. I'm not going to waste it. It's all I can do at this point in my life because I don't have bromances and I don't have an office anymore where there's 50 guys all, running off on the copier and circling and taking $20 bills and whatever you do. But in that era from 1990 until let's say 2005, 2010, when I just started to say it's just not that important that I ever win a bracket, and the one that I get in will be the dollar pool, and I'll get a $25 bonus card or something like that. But Xavier, of all the teams in America that have cost me championships, cost me on pools, every year I've had Xavier going further than I should. So Xavier is that X team that has destroyed my pool year out when Maryland wasn't destroying it. Those years you pick your favorite team because you just do, and you always pick against Duke and North Carolina because you just do. You pick against teams you hate because you do. Xavier is one of those teams I never loved them. I thought it was kind of cool that their name began with an X, and my boy Bino Ransom was an assistant there, but that was much later. I'm talking about from 1992 to 2005. Every year I had Xavier going to the 8, the 4, wherever, and they always conked out on the 64 to the 32, and they screwed me out of pool. So this year I'm circling Maryland. I need to know that Xavier can't beat Maryland on Thursday night. Aaron, I'm calling here for moral support from you.
I think you're good. I mean, look, I think you're good. Maryland should win this game, and not just because they're the 6th seed and Xavier's the 11 seed.
Every higher seed thinks that, by the way. They think they're good.
What's that?
Every higher seed thinks they're good. There's no way a 13's ever going to beat a 4 until it happens.
Yeah, exactly. And look, I mean, I'm not going to tell you that a loss cannot happen. I know the Terps aren't playing well. I know you wanted a little bit of a better showing in your hometown of D.C. or pretty close to it this past weekend. But I think that you should generally feel pretty good. Look, am I going to sit here and stomp my chest for or pound my chest for the Terps? No. But what I will say is this: Xavier was a top 10-ish team coming into the year. They have been just ravaged by injuries. Their best player, Edmund Sumner's out for the year. They had another starter suspended, brought back, and then kicked off the team in a matter of 3 weeks earlier this year. And they're just a shell of who they were. Now, I think the contrarian would say, well, they look good at the Big East tournament. They beat DePaul and they beat Butler. Obviously, the DePaul win doesn't mean much because they're one of the worst teams in the Power 6 conference.
Yeah, if there was no DePaul, they wouldn't have won since the Super Bowl at this point, right? I mean, DePaul's the only team that they beat.
Something crazy like that. Yeah, they ended up beating Butler the following night in the conference tournament. But my whole thing is, first of all, I think Butler is the kind of team, and Chris Holtman has said this. Chris Holtman was on one of our podcasts on FoxSports.com saying, look, we have the ability to beat anyone. Look, they beat Villanova twice this year. They beat Arizona. So Butler has the ability to beat anybody, but they have a chance to lose to anybody too. And so to me, I never really take too much out of conference tournaments because some teams need games more, and frankly, just everybody knows everybody else from playing, especially in a conference like the Big East where they have a true round robin. So the point I'm trying to make is I think a lot of people are a little more excited on Xavier in the big picture than maybe I am. I am going to hype you up and say that Maryland wins that opener, and then it would get interesting in the second round because I think they would struggle with Florida State, but I'm not sold that Florida State's actually going to beat Florida Gulf Coast in the first round.
Well, let's go through the brackets in general. Anything surprising, stepping out to you? One thing I think that's surprising to a lot of us is, in the end, all the maligning of the Big Ten, all the beating up of the Big Ten. In the end, bunch of teams still make it. Obviously lower seeds or whatever. But, Michigan rode the pine for a long time, as did Michigan State. The whole state of Michigan did. Clearly Wisconsin's further down from a seeding standpoint than maybe we expected. Minnesota's fine. They're in good shape. And Maryland, sort of has eased into this thing as a 6th seed. I think the shocker is that they're a 6th seed and that, as you pointed out with these conference tournaments, that horrible effort on Friday night, and it was horrible, Aaron. I was down on the floor at the Verizon Center, 18,000 strong. It didn't cost them anything. I mean, what, if they had won that game, they were going to be a 5 seed or a 4 seed? I don't think so. I think that they should feel very, very fortunate. They're going to Orlando. They're going to have a nice following go with them. I think things would get a lot tougher if they got out of there this weekend, but they were going to get tougher anyway. Look, if they had been a 7 seed or an 8 seed or 9 seed, they'd be seeing Arizona or Kentucky or, Kansas, North Carolina, one of these other teams this weekend. To say Florida State, this is a pathway that you have to expect when you get in the tournament. Beat Xavier, beat Florida State, you escape the weekend. If you can't, you're not worthy of being there anyway.
Yeah, and I think for a Maryland fan, look, this could be a lot worse case scenario. As you said, the travel is manageable. For an 11 seed, I don't feel like Xavier is as dangerous. Let me put it this way. I think Xavier, obviously playing in the Big East, was given a little bit of a benefit of the doubt, whereas I think there are really good teams from mid-major conferences on the 12 line that would have been much worse matchups. I know probably your fan base hasn't seen a ton of Nevada this year or a ton of Middle Tennessee State this year, but those are really, really good teams. And they just as easily could have been Maryland's matchup in that first-round game. And then in the second round with Florida State, look, again, you go across the rest of the bracket. Maryland could have ended up with UCLA. They could have ended up with Oregon, another really good team that I think would be a tough matchup for them. And they got Florida State. Florida State has 8 losses this year. Every single one of them is in either a neutral site or true road game. So obviously Orlando is going to be it's going to be neutral by design, but it's not really going to be neutral. We know that there will be a lot of Seminole tomahawk chopping down there. But the broader point is that, I say this to everybody that every fan base thinks they got screwed in their bracket. And the truth is, one, to answer your question directly about takeaways, is that I really feel like outside of maybe Kentucky and Wichita State, nobody really has much to complain about this year. I think everybody's road is kind of manageable. It's kind of fair. And again, as it pertains to Maryland specifically, it seems very manageable. At some point, you got to beat quality teams. And I think considering that they're going to get a 3 seed potentially in the second round, they could have gotten a lot tougher draw than getting Florida State.
I like the way the brackets work at the top for next weekend, that, North Carolina and Kentucky could be on a course to meet in Memphis, that Gonzaga and Arizona would be meeting out west. Obviously, up in New York, you'd have Duke and Villanova going after each other next weekend. And then Kansas is, going to stay at home and play in Kansas City and may see Louisville, Michigan, Oregon, somebody like that. Things are really set up nicely, I think, for the round of 16 and the round of 8. And then that's as it should be. And there'll be some Cinderellas there. There'll be some teams putting on the slipper. You got to figure out where they're coming from. And certainly in the Big Ten, nobody's given anyone any thought that there is a Final Four team in the Big Ten right now. I don't think anybody believes that.
Yeah, I find it pretty hard to believe myself, and look, I'm not the Big Ten basher that some people are, and I totally, get the frustration from Big Ten fans. I think they're kind of unfairly treated in the national media. What I would say is this, is that I think you're right, Nestor, and then I think those top teams, look, I've really said for the last 2 or 3 weeks, I think there are 10 teams that are clearly better than everybody else. The 3 from the ACC, Duke, Carolina, Louisville. The 3 from the Pac-12, Arizona, Oregon, UCLA, Villanova, Kansas, Kentucky, and Gonzaga. That's 10. Sorry, I was doing that all off the top of my head there, Nestor. But look, I think they're all hands down just better than everybody else in the tournament. Look, can one of them lose on the first weekend? Of course. But I think more than not, you're going to see most of, if not all of those teams advance to the Sweet 16, and then we're just going to get some epic Sweet 16, epic Elite 8 matchups going from there. Unfortunately, it doesn't feel like there's a title contender out of the Big Ten. But look, Wisconsin came into the year as a top 10 team. I think if they get to the second round and they have to play Villanova, they're going to give them trouble. I think that if Purdue happens to get Kansas, I think Purdue is a nightmare matchup for Kansas with that size down low. Does that mean they're going to win? Who knows? Who knows if they even get there? But the broader point is that, yes, it was a little bit of a down year for the Big Ten, but let's not act like these are, plucky underdogs from the Conference USA or from the Southland Conference. Like, if they get into these games and if they can win the games they're supposed to and take care of business, they can cause a lot of havoc for some of these higher-seeded teams that we kind of believe to be superior, like the Kansases, Kentuckys, Villanovas, et cetera.
Well, we're going to find out on Sunday night. We go to bed, right? I mean, they're all going to be playing through these games. Wisconsin with Virginia Tech. We expect Purdue to advance, but they're going to see Iowa State probably in the next round. All of these teams will, other than Purdue as a 4 seed, none of them are expected to be alive on Monday, right? Literally.
Yeah. I mean, look, you look at, just statistically, you just look at the actual matchups. Yeah, I don't think any of them are, based on, at least seeding-wise, expected to be there. Certainly, you could make the case that maybe 1 or 2 of them can potentially pull an upset in that second round to advance. But no, I don't think anybody is going to be expected. I don't think any fan base is going to be just, staring at the ceiling, unable to believe that they didn't get to the Sweet 16 on Saturday or Sunday night from the Big Ten. But I will say this about the Big Ten. It's kind of random. I'm going off subject here. I'm so fascinated to see what happens if Tom Crean leaves Indiana, because I do think that Indiana with the right coach can be that program that we put in that conversation every single year with the Kansases, Kentuckys, Dukes, North Carolinas, whatever. I know it's totally off topic, but while we're kind of talking about the Big Ten being down, I think a lot of that is that Indiana is supposed to be the team that's consistently in the top 15, top 10, and they just haven't been that program forever. And I'll be curious to see whether Tom Crean gets fired, whether he sneaks out out the back door to another job if Indiana can get a guy to get them back to that level, because I do think that it would help the conference overall to have Indiana kind of be who they've been historically.
68 teams getting together here this week. Aaron Torres will be monitoring all of it. You can follow his journey at Fox Sports or at Aaron_Torres. Maryland, of course, on Thursday night taking on Xavier. Not a whole lot of other local stories. A couple local kids involved in the tournament across the country. And, maybe if you've watched Bucknell or UNC Wilmington play a local competition around here. But for you, you've written a book on Kentucky, One and Fun. And they're clearly a favorite in this tournament and well thought of as a 2 seed coming out of the South. Thoughts about them, thoughts about Kansas, and even Villanova kind of come back and defend the championship. Do you have in your mind, a clear-cut team that you expect to win this tournament?
I really don't, and it was funny, we obviously, over on Fox, they ask us to quickly fill out a bracket after the announcement comes out, and I hopped on one of our podcasts, and I got super boring and had Villanova and North Carolina in the national championship game, which, in case people don't know, might sound a little familiar to last year. Look, between now and tip-off Thursday morning, that might change. But no, I think any of those 10 teams that I mentioned can win it. I think Villanova, Duke, Carolina, I think they all have kind of a quote-unquote inside track there. Look, I think that there are 7 to 8 teams that are substantially better than everybody else, maybe those 10 in total. But I think any of them can beat any other ones. It's fascinating to me. What I was saying yesterday was this, Nestor, is that one thing that's great about basketball, and really all sports, is that styles make fights and styles create intriguing matchups where it's so fascinating because you think, okay, if this team plays that team in the Elite Eight, I don't think they can win. But if they play this other team, then they're going to the Final Four. And so I just think we're going to see a lot of that come Sweet 16, Elite Eight, where if you get a UCLA and Kentucky in the Sweet 16, I think one of them matches up UCLA better with North Carolina than Kentucky does. So to me, it's just a broader way of me saying that I think those 7, 8 teams, be it a Villanova, be it a North Carolina, be it a Kansas, should be the favorites, obviously are the favorites going in. But I think so much of their path just comes down to who do they have to play. Just as a quick another example, I'm going off on a tangent here, but like Gonzaga, I think Gonzaga has a really tough matchup with Arizona potentially in the Elite Eight. You know what? They might not have to play Arizona, and if that's the case, they can make a run and maybe get to that first Final Four in school history. So it's so tough to project out. But no, I would say I don't have any team that I feel strongly about. I think when I initially filled out my bracket, my first hunch was to go with Villanova back-to-back, but I think there's 7 or 8 teams that can beat them.
Give me a team that is a double-digit seed that you expect to make it through this week, that you would circle on a bracket. A lot of people, seem to get into a Princeton or Middle Tennessee State, some of these 10s or 11s, 12 seeds. You got a team at the bottom that you think's good for a couple of wins here?
All right, so I'll give you a few here. So one, you nailed Middle Tennessee State, so I'll just avoid them. The other one that's really intriguing.
Well, they had Minnesota, who we've seen, and then they would see Butler. So, that's not an easy draw for them.
It's not an easy draw for them, but it could be a lot worse. And remember, for people who don't remember, Middle Tennessee State was the team that beat Michigan State last year, Michigan State with Denzel Valentine, that many people picked to win the national championship. So we'll stay away from them because I think you've probably covered them pretty extensively, Nestor. A couple to keep an eye on. So one, Rhode Island Rams, right? So first of all, I'm a little biased here. I went to UConn, but I also spent some time at URI for a year. It's a long story. We won't get into it. But don't worry, I left on good terms. I don't want it to sound like I did something bad.
Well, you needed to go to a small state, obviously. It's where you fit in.
But that was a little too small for me. But anyways, I digress. But listen, here's the deal with them. So their top 2 players were basically highly thought of. First of all, they're coached by Danny Hurley, legendary basketball family. Bobby Hurley's his brother. Bob Hurley Sr., the Hall of Famer, is his father.
The king of New Jersey before Springsteen and Bon Jovi came along, correct.
And I know that pains you to say. I know how much you love the boss. Although, as we established last time, I was on The Real Boss as the person that you share a bedroom with. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. So, so Rhode Island, right? So Bob Hurley, or Danny Hurley's the man. They have their top 2 players were basically pretty highly thought of recruits easily could have ended up at a Big East school, at maybe a second-tier ACC school like a Wake Forest or something like that. Maybe not the caliber of athlete that ends up at Duke, but you could see them at an NC State, a Wake Forest, a Clemson, whatever. So they have real players. They're playing their best basketball right now. And I think, I haven't seen the lines, but I wouldn't even be surprised if they were favored going into their first-round matchup with Creighton. Kind of like I said about Xavier, they're just beat up right now, Creighton is. And then in the second round, they get Oregon. And Oregon, for people who don't know, they won the Pac-12 regular season title, were in position to get potentially a number one seed, and then all of a sudden what ended up happening was their star center gets hurt in the Pac-12 tournament. He's out for the rest of the season. The reason I think that's important is because Oregon just doesn't have that interior presence right now, and Rhode Island, frankly, doesn't have much of an interior presence at all. If this matchup had happened without that injury, I think Rhode Island would really struggle. But with that injury, I think it opens the door for them to potentially pull an upset. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I would not be shocked at all to see the University of Rhode Island in the second weekend in the NCAA tournament.
He is Aaron Torres, giving us some tips before we fill out the brackets. You can follow his journey out on Twitter at Aaron_Torres. That's AAORN, just like Hank. And Torres, Mike, like Mike Torres, our former pitcher here. We will be following you out of Fox Sports and certainly following out on Twitter as these things get going on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday as we shovel out of the snow here and get ready for opening day. And hopefully the Terps are going to get through the weekend here. I have, I'm going to circle Maryland through 2 rounds here. I'm going to get them through because I do that anyway, but I think they're going to win this weekend. I have a better vibe about them. I think when the chips are down, I think Melo's going to hit some shots on Thursday. That's my belief.
Yeah, and I just really think that, like I said, all things considered, the matchup could be a lot worse. I mean, UCLA is a 3 seed that was playing for a 1 seed this weekend. Oregon is a 3 seed that, as I just alluded to, could have been a 1 seed without an injury. So to me, Maryland, just considering, like you said, that they didn't play well in the Big Ten tournament, they didn't close the year strong, it didn't seem to have an adverse effect, 1, and 2, maybe even more importantly, they just got an advantageous matchup where, let's be honest, this whole tournament is about matchups. And yeah, if Maryland had won a couple more games in the regular season, maybe they're a 4 seed, but maybe they have a tougher second round matchup. The point I'm trying to make, Florida State deserves to be a 3 seed. They've done enough to get there, but that doesn't mean that they're invincible just because they're the higher ranked team. And so to me, like I said, I think worst case scenario, I just think it's a really, really good situation for Maryland. I see no reason why they can't advance to Sweet 16.
We're going to be watching. You're going to be watching, wearing out the remote. The real question this week, Aaron, is where in the hell is True TV on my cable box? I mean, that's going to be the hardest part to figure out, I think.
One time a year, we all find out, and then we go back to just not knowing until next year.
Channel 364, True TV, whatever it is. I don't know. Hey, man, great having you on. Rest up. We'll try to grab you again next week, and hopefully we're talking about the Terps knowing their way to San Jose next week.
All right, very good. Thank you.
You got it. Aaron Torres, Fox Sports, joining us here. You can find me out in the Bahia Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day. I am everywhere there. Just download the TuneIn Radio app, and we can put you together live or on tape, or certainly out on our Facebook Live and our YouTube WNS TV channel. There's lots of ways to keep up with us before, during, and after the storm. We are waiting for the storm with the Orioles to get back up here on opening day, and worried about Chris Tillman. We've been talking about that. Luke will have any breaking news on the Orioles, on the Ravens, on the Terps to you first on the WNST Tech Service. That is brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Our morning newspaper ships into your email inbox every morning at 7 a.m., chock full of highlights, scores, box scores, standings, and news stories, as well as our WNST work. It is all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com. I'm Nestor. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and streaming live on our Facebook and YouTube. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.